Welcome back to the Nat Reports. It's the show that gives you a daily sports business brief. Our feature story of the day has to be the fact that, I don't know if you saw this, but Scott Hanson of the NFL Network and, of course, NFL RedZone fame is about to actually be acquired by Disney and the good folks over at the mothership and ESPN. But they aren't just acquiring Scott Hanson. They're actually going to acquire the whole thing. Basically, the NFL has decided to move out of the production business, which means the NFL Network, NFL Plus, NFL Fantasy Football, all of that is about to actually get gobbled up by the mothership and the folks over at ESPN. That is our feature story of the day on the Nat Reports. As always, I'm Dave DeBaugh coming to you, of course, from the Silicon Valley. We're going to dive straight into our feature story in just a sec. Two other stories that we'll cover on the back end. Another one actually relates to ESPN. This one has to do with the fact that Rich Eisen is returning to ESPN. Now, not in the way that you think. Rich Eisen's actually returning to ESPN Radio. He'll have the 12 to 3 time slot, which of course goes head to head with the Pat McAfee show. So we'll get into that story in just a little bit. And then I also have a story for you about WNBA All-Star ratings. Hey, if you're new to the Nat Reports, please go ahead and subscribe. And of course, like this video. I talked about how the WNBA All-Star ratings were going to tank. And of course, this was an easy one. Of course, I was right. A lot of people saw that coming when it appeared Caitlin Clark wasn't actually going to be able to play. So we'll get into both of those stories at the back end of our feature story. But clearly, I think the biggest story in the world of sports and sports business right now has to be the potential of ESPN and Disney actually closing this deal to acquire the NFL Network. And as I mentioned, Scott Hanson and a bunch of other things that the NFL Network currently does. Fantasy football, NFL Plus, basically anything related to the NFL. Now, we know that when it comes to live television in North America, the one thing that actually continues to do well, and no, we're not going to have a debate about Stephen Colbert tonight, but the one thing that actually does really well is, of course, the National Football League and, of course, anything related to football. I mean, college football certainly does well, too. But when we talk about the king of television ratings, actual real television ratings, it's the NFL that is the king of all of that. And so for ESPN, who is all about the content is king theory, to finally get to that point where it looks like they are about to pull the trigger on this deal to actually acquire the NFL Network and all of the pieces that go along with it, is a pretty earth-shattering deal for some of the other major media outlets. Now, for years, it looked as if the folks over at CBS would be the team that would eventually take over the NFL Network. And of course, we've seen what's going on with CBS as they are part of a larger merger that is currently going down. And instead of CBS actually picking up the shows that have made CBS all of the money over the years, they're sort of going in the opposite direction. Of course, I'm speaking of the Colbert firing. But beyond all of that, you know, as time sort of went on, the NFL Network pulled back, decided to not sell itself to CBS. And of course, the NFL over the years has flirted, of course, with selling off their properties numerous times. I think they've finally gotten to the point where they've said, you know, it is expensive. It has gotten even more expensive to actually keep one of these networks running. And if they're able to actually get $2 billion out of ESPN, maybe a little bit of ESPN equity on the backside, why not take the deal? From an ESPN content is king perspective, it certainly makes a lot of sense. ESPN as well is going to attempt to charge you guys more money in the fall when they actually complete their new app offering, which is coming out this fall. And certainly, having more NFL assets would certainly help that pitch out. Though I'm not really sure yet how successful that thing that that ESPN wants to do this fall is actually going to be. We'll just have to wait and see. But from a pure content perspective for ESPN, and this is absolutely a no-brainer. Yes, maybe they're giving away too much cash. The other side of this as well is the fact that the television contracts might actually come up in 2029. And if those actually do come up a little bit early in 2029, ESPN and Disney certainly want to be in a position to continue to play the way they want to play with the National Football League. And certainly being part of the NFL to some extent from an equity stake and also running those properties for the NFL would certainly give them an upper hand to, at the very least, keep the programming that they currently have with the National Football League, which from an economic standpoint for Disney and for ESPN makes a lot of sense. Now, $2 billion might seem like a lot of money, but for the mothership and for ESPN, this is an investment in the future as much as it's an investment in what it could actually bring to them today. This is all about making sure that ESPN, which might lose Major League Baseball down the road, is still going to have the king of all sports in North America, which, of course, is the National Football League. Hey, love to know your thoughts and opinions on this. Please go ahead and drop them in when you have a chance. All right, two other quick stories for you tonight on the Nat Reports. We'll stay with ESPN for a second. Bring up the fact that Rich Eisen, who, of course, is the host of the NFL Network's Sunday morning show, who, of course, was at ESPN, who, of course, left ESPN to help found the NFL Network. As all of this stuff starts to work itself out and Eisen and the folks over at the NFL Network get gobbled back into ESPN, the vote on this, I forgot to mention, is probably going to be in the first week of August for the NFL owners. At least that's the last report that I saw. Prior to that deal getting done, Rich Eisen is actually doing a deal to be the radio voice of ESPN between 12 and 3 p.m. Now, we know the Rich Eisen show has certainly been very successful over the years, and that show will now move over to ESPN Radio. So it will run from 12 to 3 p.m., interestingly enough, going head-to-head at least part of that time against the Pat McAfee show, as well as head-to-head against Stephen A. Smith's new show on Sirius XM Radio as well. So it's a very interesting time in the sports world. We do know that, ESPN Radio, at least during the daytime, is a bit of a throwaway at this point. And we know that, ESPN and Pat McAfee and, of course, First Take and Get Up are the shows that generate a lot of revenue for them, as well as PTI in the late afternoon. So, radio is sort of an extra afterthought at this point for ESPN. still a good move for them. Rich Eisen is certainly fantastic. He'll be fantastic to listen to if you just happen to be out and about between 12 and 3 p.m. EST, because he certainly does a great job getting interviews as well as talking about the National Football League, as you might imagine, quite a lot. All right, and our final story of the day was an obvious story. I mean, like I literally could have written this a couple days before the WNBA All-Star Game actually took place. You know, a lot of us in the media had actually came to the conclusion, which was an easy conclusion to come to, that of course the WNBA All-Star ratings were going to suffer because Caitlin Clark wasn't actually able to play. Now, the WNBA did its very best to downplay the situation as much as they possibly could. But as I mentioned, it didn't work. Ratings from 2024, which is last year when they had their All-Star game, historic high for the WNBA. They had 3.44 million average viewers tune in to watch the All-Star game. In this past weekend's All-Star game, they had 2.19 million average viewers tune in to actually watch the All-Star game this time around. And of course, that was a 36% dip. If you were to attempt to compare this All-Star game ratings to what the Major League Baseball All-Star ratings got about a week and a half ago, you'd have to basically have 4 WNBA All-Star games at 2 million plus attendance to equal 1 Major League Baseball All-Star game. Just want to keep this all in perspective. We'll cover more of the pay the players piece and angle of the WNBA a little bit later this week. I think at the end of the day, and I have talked about this a lot on this podcast already, but at the end of the day, you can't really look at exactly how NBA players are getting paid and expect the WNBA players to get paid in the same way. They are in 2 completely different financial universes at this point. But it is safe to say that at the very least, the WNBA players deserve to make significantly more money than they currently are making. We'll get into the details as to why that is, and certainly the new $2.2 billion television contract plays into that, which gives the teams, which gives the league about $200 million a year in annual revenue. Certainly is a big part of this. But at the end of the day, if you want a business to grow and it's showing signs of it finally growing, it makes no sense to actually try to stunt the growth of that business. We'll get into the financial details of exactly what that means later in the week. But that is where I sort of stand on this. I think certainly the doubling the potential money that a player could make makes a lot of sense. I don't think we're at that point yet with the WNBA where there can be $1 million players. Maybe there's a $1 million player exception per team. Maybe there's a way of actually sort of working this out. But I will say that the teams today, basically, their salaries collectively are around $1 to $1.5 million. That's what the salaries are for these WNBA teams today. So to jump all the way to a single player making $1 million could feel a little bit extreme, especially considering the financial structure of the WNBA today. But once again, we'll get into more details of that a little bit later in the week. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to our Tuesday night edition of the Nat Reports. It is Tuesday night, July 22nd of the year 2025, and we are just in front of 5 p.m. on the West Coast. All right. Thanks once again for tuning into the Nat Reports. As always, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit.